No species, no empire, no force could ever threaten us. We are the Zorathians, the galaxy's ultimate predators. The words rang in the council chamber, dripping with the arrogance of millennia. The Zorathians sat in a perfect circle, their bodies large and imposing, their faces cold and merciless. At the center, Koraz, their warlord, stood as the embodiment of their belief, an unstoppable species, a force too terrifying for any to challenge. The galaxy had bowed before them for eons. Planets had fallen beneath their boots, civilizations reduced to ash, their species erased with ruthless efficiency. To the Zorathians, conquest was a tradition, not a goal. Their empire was untouchable. And yet, something strange was beginning to stir in the outermost fringes of known space, something that made even the most seasoned warlords pause. Koraz felt it first, an unfamiliar scent, sharp and foreign, in the dark expanse of space. It was a whisper, nothing more. A fleet, a single ship, moving across the stars like a shadow. The data was sparse, but there was one thing the Zorathians could agree on. The ship was human. Humans, the primitive, resource-deprived species that barely scraped by on a single, insignificant world in the galaxy's periphery. Ridiculous. A joke even. What were they but small, soft creatures who had yet to make their mark? Send the fleet, Koraz ordered, a sneer forming beneath his scarred, reptilian face. Let's put an end to this farce. The Zorathian warships, sleek and menacing, tore through space toward the small human craft. It wasn't the first time the Zorathians had investigated a new species, but it was the first time they would do so with this level of disdain. They expected nothing less than an easy victory. The humans, clearly outmatched, should have cowered. They should have begged for mercy. Instead, they did something unexpected, something the Zorathians would later realize was the beginning of their downfall. They fought. At first, it seemed like a typical skirmish. The Zorathians cut through the human ship's defenses with ease, sending the smaller vessels spinning into the void. But then the humans did something they couldn't comprehend. They disappeared. It wasn't a trick of the mind. The ship simply vanished from their scanners, as if it had never been there at all. And then, from the shadows, came an explosion, a blinding flash that took down one of the Zorathian warships. Impossible, Koraz muttered, his voice low. He could feel the stirrings of doubt in his gut, but he crushed it. No, this was just a fluke. A lucky shot. But as the hours passed, the humans struck again, and again. Their attacks were precise, surgical, almost as if they knew exactly where to hit. One by one, Zorathian ships were destroyed, their once proud fleet unraveling under the relentless assault. And still, the humans never showed themselves. They never revealed their true numbers, never let the Zorathians catch a glimpse of their tactics. It was as if the humans had mastered the art of war, and they were using it against the galaxy's predators. Koraz's confidence began to crack. These humans weren't just another weak species. There was something in their approach, a cold, calculated precision that no one could have expected. They were intelligent, resourceful, and they were relentless. Report, Koraz growled. The officer's voice was shaky. We're losing ships, sir. More than half of our fleet is disabled or destroyed. We've never encountered anything like this before. The warlord's eyes narrowed. He couldn't afford to lose control. The Zorathian Empire had always been the hunter, never the hunted. Yet, in the face of this unknown force, they had become prey. The hunt was on, and the Zorathians would soon learn the most dangerous truth of all. Humanity's greatest weapon was not its technology, nor its numbers, but its ability to adapt, to outthink, and to strike where no one expected. The galaxy had never seen anything like the human spirit, and it would never forget what happened next. They thought we were nothing. They were wrong. The Zorathian fleet had underestimated humanity, and they were paying the price for it. What began as a small skirmish had escalated into something much more dangerous, something that threatened to unravel the Zorathian Empire from the inside out. They had come to the humans' doorstep expecting an easy conquest, but instead, they had found themselves trapped in a nightmare. The humans had never been known for their military might. For centuries, they had been relegated to the role of quiet observers in the galactic theater. But all of that was about to change. On Earth, hidden beneath layers of secrecy, a new kind of warrior had emerged. The Special Forces, an elite unit that combined the resourcefulness of humanity's greatest minds with the sheer brutality of its fiercest fighters. These soldiers were not born into a life of privilege or wealth. They were the product of years of conflict, hardened in the fires of war and trial, and ready to take on an empire that had once seemed invincible. They were ready to show the galaxy that humans were more than they appeared. On the outer edge of human space, a single ship, a stealth cruiser named Vigilance, was making its way through the stars, preparing for its first strike against the Zorathians. The ship's crew, all members of the Special Forces, were silent as they went over the plan for the next phase of their mission. No one spoke, but the tension in the air was palpable. The stakes were high. Failure wasn't an option. This isn't just about winning a battle, Commander Holt, the leader of the mission, said, his voice cutting through the stillness. This is about proving we're not a threat to be dismissed. This is our moment. The Vigilance dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of a Zorathian convoy. The fleet had no idea they were about to be ambushed by humans who, until recently, had been nothing more than a blip on their radar. The attack came without warning. Human ships, small but fast, struck from the shadows, moving with precision and speed that left the Zorathians in chaos. The first two Zorathian cruisers were disabled within minutes, their communications jammed before they could even issue an alert. The humans knew their enemy. They had studied the Zorathians, watched their movements, learned their weaknesses, and crafted strategies designed to exploit them. It wasn't strength that made them formidable. It was intelligence. The Zorathians were powerful, yes, but they were predictable. And that was their greatest flaw. The Special Forces soldiers, led by Commander Holt, moved through the chaos like ghosts, executing their attacks with chilling accuracy. They disabled ship after ship, overwhelming the Zorathian fleet with guerrilla tactics that the Predators were ill-prepared to counter. The humans didn't engage in open battles. They struck fast, hit hard, and vanished before their enemy could react. For the first time in centuries, the Zorathians were on the defensive. Back in the heart of Zorathian space, Karaz, the warlord, watched the data streams come in with growing disbelief. His fleet was being destroyed by humans. How could this be? They were nothing more than a fledgling species, barely out of their cradle of a single planet. The Zorathians had faced warlords and conquerors from every corner of the galaxy, but never had they faced an enemy so cunning, so ruthless, so human. They are not what we thought, Karaz growled, slamming his fist on the table. They fight like us, but with a new kind of hunger. His officers, nervous and confused, said nothing. They had all been trained to believe in the superiority of the Zorathian race. The humans had never even stood a chance, or so they had thought. We need to reconsider our strategy, Karaz muttered, pacing the command room. This is no ordinary enemy. The humans had awakened something deep within the galaxy, something the Zorathians had not anticipated. It wasn't just their technology, their weapons, or their tactics that made them dangerous. It was their relentless will to fight, their ability to adapt and evolve at a pace no other species could match. The Zorathians had made a grave mistake, and humanity was only just getting started. They thought we fought like any other species. Now they'll learn why that was their mistake. The Zorathians had once believed themselves to be the apex predators of the galaxy. They had dominated every battlefield, crushed every enemy beneath their boot, and left entire civilizations trembling in their wake. But now, as the remnants of their fleet limped through space, their once unshakable confidence had been replaced by confusion and fear. Humanity was unlike anything they had ever encountered. While the Zorathians had relied on brute force and overwhelming numbers, the humans fought with something far more dangerous: intellect. The Special Forces had perfected a new form of warfare, one that did not focus on pure destruction, but on subtlety, precision, and strategy. They struck with lightning speed and vanished before the Zorathians could retaliate. The Zorathian High Command, shaken by the losses, was scrambling to reassemble their forces. They could not understand how a species so young could pose such a threat. But what they had yet to realize was that humanity's strength was not in its firepower, but in its ability to adapt and think outside the constraints of traditional warfare. On the edge of Zorathian space, a new battle was set to unfold. The humans, after crippling the initial fleet, were preparing for their most daring attack yet: an assault on the heart of Zorathian power. Commander Holt stood on the bridge of the Vigilance, his eyes scanning the holographic map of the enemy's territory. "We've tracked their movements," Holt said, his voice steady. "They're pulling back to regroup. They're desperate. They think we're out of ships, out of time, out of options. But they're wrong. The plan was simple: strike where the Zorathians would least expect it. In the past, the humans had been scattered and outnumbered. But now, they were unified, organized, and determined. The Vigilance was not alone. A handful of human warships, all equipped with stealth technology and advanced weapons, were about to converge on a critical Zorathian supply depot located on a barren moon. For the Zorathians, it was a routine operation, a simple resupply run. They had no idea that the humans had been watching their every move, learning their tactics, and preparing for the perfect moment to strike. As a Zorathian convoy approached the moon, the humans were already in position, cloaked in the shadow of nearby asteroids. Holt gave the signal. The attack came without warning. Human ships emerged from the darkness, striking with pinpoint accuracy. The first two Zorathian transports were destroyed in seconds. Their crews never even had time to react. The humans disabled the rest of the convoy's ships with shocking efficiency, leaving the Zorathians disoriented and scrambling for a countermeasure. "Where did they come from?" a Zorathian officer screamed, his voice cracking. "They're everywhere." The humans moved with surgical precision. They didn't just destroy, they disrupted. Communications were severed. Weapons were disabled. Ships were boarded and sabotaged from within. The Zorathians could only watch in horror as their once mighty fleet was torn apart. Commander Holt's voice came through the comms, calm and collected. "This is only the beginning. If they want a war, we'll show them what it means to fight a human one." The Zorathians had no answer. They had believed themselves to be the pinnacle of galactic power, unassailable and invincible. But they had never anticipated a species that could not only outfight them, but outthink them at every turn. As the last of the Zorathian fleet limped away, battered and broken, Karaz was left staring at the wreckage of his ships, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. His warlords, once proud and resolute, were silent. "They're not like us," Karaz muttered, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and fear. "They fight without honor, without rules. They're a plague." For the first time in centuries, the Zorathians felt the sting of true vulnerability. They had never fought an enemy that could think beyond the battlefield, that could adapt faster than their tactics could evolve. The Zorathians had always relied on their strength, their speed, and their dominance. But humans were something entirely different, something far more dangerous. The war was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a game of wits. And the Zorathians were losing. "You thought we fought for survival. But you were wrong. We fight for something far greater." The Zorathians had learned the hard way that humans were not to be underestimated. But what they didn't understand, what they couldn't comprehend, was that humanity's greatest strength was not in its weapons, its technology, or even its tactics. It was in its spirit, the unyielding, burning drive to protect, to adapt, and to survive against all odds. After the disastrous assault on their supply depot, the Zorathians were left with no choice but to regroup. Their fleet was in tatters, their morale shattered. Karaz, once a symbol of unchallenged power, now faced an enemy that was unrelenting, unpredictable, and above all, determined. Meanwhile, Commander Holt and his crew aboard the Vigilance had taken a moment to catch their breath. The latest victory had been significant, but it was only the beginning. The humans weren't fighting for conquest. They were fighting to protect their home, their families, their future. And that was something the Zorathians couldn't match. Inside the Vigilance's command center, Holt stood at the viewport, watching the distant stars. He could feel the weight of what they had started pressing down on him. Victory had come too easily, too quickly. He knew the Zorathians would retaliate soon. And when they did, they would come with everything they had. "Is it enough?" a voice asked from behind him. It was Lieutenant Arya, one of Holt's closest officers. Her voice was soft, yet heavy with the same uncertainty that plagued them all. The Zorathians were powerful, more powerful than anything the humans had faced before. And they were relentless. Holt turned to her, his expression resolute. "It has to be. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for something they can't even begin to understand." The truth was, humanity's drive came from a place deep within. It wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about preserving the essence of what it meant to be human. It was about standing against the forces that sought to wipe out everything they had worked so hard to build. And most of all, it was about showing the galaxy that humanity would never kneel, never surrender. Days passed, and the humans' next move was set in motion. A series of calculated strikes against Zorathian outposts had crippled their logistics. Each attack was a blow not just to their forces, but to their psyche. The Zorathians were no longer fighting to conquer. They were fighting to stay alive. Karaz's frustration had reached its peak. He called for an emergency meeting with his generals, his eyes burning with rage. "We've underestimated them," he snarled. "These humans are more than just an obstacle. They are a threat to everything we've built. We cannot afford to let them continue this." A young officer spoke up. "But they're everywhere, sir. They're always one step ahead. How do we fight an enemy we can't predict?" Karaz's eyes narrowed. "We will force them into a corner. We will show them what happens when they challenge the true power of the galaxy." But deep down, Karaz knew that his confidence was waning. The humans had proven themselves adaptable, clever, and willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The Zorathians, for all their strength, had never faced an enemy that could outthink them at every turn. Back aboard the Vigilance, Holt received a message. The Zorathians had regrouped, and they were coming for Earth. But this time, Holt wasn't afraid. He knew the Zorathians didn't understand the power that drove humanity, the will to protect, to stand tall no matter the odds. "We're ready," Holt said quietly, turning to his crew. "We've fought this war on our terms. We won't stop now." The humans were no longer just soldiers. They were the embodiment of the human spirit. And in that moment, Holt knew that no matter what happened next, the Zorathians had already lost. Because the Zorathians had underestimated humanity's greatest weapon, its unbreakable resolve. And no empire, no matter how powerful, could ever defeat that. They thought they were hunting us. Now they'll learn what it means to be the hunted. The tides of war had turned, and for the first time, the Zorathians were on the defensive. Their fleet was shattered, their once immense strength eroded by the relentless precision of humanity's attacks. But they were not a species to give up easily. Karaz, their warlord, would not allow his empire to crumble without a fight. But there was something he had underestimated. The humans, far from being the easy prey they once thought, had evolved into something far more dangerous, a force capable of striking with ruthless efficiency. And now, with every Zorathian ship that fell, humanity's confidence grew. In the cold void of space, the humans had set their sights on the heart of Zorathian power, the capital world of Zora Prime. Once a fortress surrounded by countless fleets, Zora Prime had been the crown jewel of the Zorathian Empire. It was said that no force in the galaxy could breach its defenses. Until now, Commander Holt stood in the command center of the Vigilance, staring at the holographic display that showed the Zorathian capital in the distance. His mind raced with the knowledge that this would be the final, decisive blow, a strike that could cripple the Zorathians for good. They had learned from their earlier attacks. They were no longer just soldiers, but hunters in their own right, prepared to strike with deadly intent. "We've got one shot at this," Holt said, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of what was to come. "We can't afford any mistakes." Arya, his second-in-command, looked at him with a mixture of determination and concern. "We can't get too close, sir. Zora Prime's defenses are unlike anything we've encountered." Holt nodded. He knew the stakes. The Zorathians would bring everything they had to protect their capital. This was no longer a simple battle. It was a full-scale war for survival. If they failed, humanity's resurgence would be nothing more than a fleeting dream. But Holt wasn't concerned with failure. He knew something the Zorathians didn't. Humans were not afraid to take risks, not afraid to challenge the impossible. And if there was one thing humanity had proven, it was that they could take on the unimaginable and come out victorious. The Vigilance crept toward the edges of Zora Prime's defenses, invisible to the naked eye. The stealth technology that had kept them hidden from the Zorathian radar had allowed them to get this far. But it wouldn't last long. They had to make their move quickly. As they neared the Zorathian capital, the first wave of defenses hit. Blinding energy blasts lit up the darkness of space, and the Vigilance rocked as the shields absorbed the brunt of the assault. But Holt and his crew remained calm. This was exactly what they had prepared for. They had studied Zorathian tactics, learned the layout of their defenses, and now it was time to use that knowledge to their advantage. "Deploy the countermeasures," Holt ordered. "Let's give them a taste of their own medicine." Human ships emerged from the shadows, swift and deadly, launching their attack on the Zorathian fleets that surrounded Zora Prime. The Zorathians, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, scrambled to respond. But the humans were already inside their defenses, already striking where it hurt the most at the heart of their empire. Inside the Zorathian command center, Karaz seethed as he watched his forces crumble. The humans had anticipated their every move. They knew where to strike, knew where the weak points were, and exploited them with terrifying precision. "They're everywhere," a Zorathian officer shouted, panic rising in his voice. "We can't contain them." Karaz clenched his fists in frustration. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. He had believed the Zorathians to be the ultimate predators, the apex of warfare. But now, for the first time in his life, he felt the sting of true vulnerability. The humans were no longer fighting to survive, they were hunting. The battle for Zora Prime raged on, but with each passing moment, the Zorathian forces grew weaker. The tide had irrevocably shifted, and as the humans continued to dismantle their empire piece by piece, the Zorathians had no choice but to face the reality that they were no longer the predators, they were the prey. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but for Karaz and his people, there was no escaping it. The humans had arrived, and they would never be the same again. They thought they had us cornered. They were wrong. Zora Prime, once the shining jewel of the Zorathian Empire, now lay in ruins. Its great cities were little more than smoldering craters, its fleets scattered across the void like broken shards of a shattered empire. The Zorathians, for all their might, had underestimated the one thing they could never defeat: human ingenuity. The battle had been brutal. The humans had struck with the fury of a species pushed to the brink. But now, with the capital in tatters, the time had come for the final confrontation. Commander Holt stood at the helm of the Vigilance, watching the star systems fall away on the screens before him. The war was far from over, but this final strike, this last stand, was about to break the Zorathians for good. "They're gathering," Arya said, her voice tight with tension. The remnants of their fleet are regrouping. They know this is their final chance. Holt nodded, his eyes dark with the weight of their mission. The Zorathians had one last card to play, a desperate weapon capable of wiping out entire fleets in a single strike. They had kept it hidden until now. The weapon was the last hope of the Zorathian warlords, and they would use it to defend their dying empire at any cost. "They'll come for us," Holt said, his voice low. "And when they do, we'll give them a fight they'll never forget." The Vigilance moved silently through the darkened expanse, its cloaking devices allowing it to slip past the Zorathian sensors undetected. But Holt knew the Zorathians weren't fools. They had been on the defensive for too long, and desperation would make them unpredictable. The time for stealth was over. It was time for humanity to make their stand. Across the galaxy, the remaining Zorathian forces were assembling, their final assault forming in the shadow of their ultimate weapon. Karaz, still reeling from the devastation of Zora Prime, stood at the center of the command center aboard his flagship, his face a mask of fury and determination. "This is it," Karaz growled, his voice like gravel. "We either crush them here or we die trying. There is no other option." The Zorathians knew they couldn't afford to fail. The weapon they had deployed was the culmination of centuries of research, a massive energy cannon capable of obliterating entire fleets in a single blast. With it, they could turn the tide and wipe out humanity once and for all. But the humans had already anticipated their move. As the Zorathian fleet advanced, the Vigilance led the charge, flanked by several human warships. Holt's crew moved with deadly precision, striking with surgical accuracy at the Zorathian ships. They were outnumbered, but they fought with the fire of a species that had nothing to lose. Every shot, every maneuver was designed to wear down the Zorathians and prevent them from getting close enough to use their weapon. The Zorathian fleet retaliated, launching wave after wave of attacks, their weapons firing with fury. The Vigilance danced around the onslaught, dodging, weaving, and returning fire in kind. Holt's mind raced as he calculated each move, each counter, each opening. "We have one shot at this," Holt said, eyes narrowed. "When we break their lines, we need to get to that weapon. It's the only way." The humans knew this was a fight for everything. If they failed, the Zorathians would crush them completely. But they also knew that if they succeeded, they would secure not just their survival, but the future of humanity. The final push came when the Zorathians, in a last-ditch effort, activated their ultimate weapon. The massive energy cannon flared to life, sending a beam of destructive power toward the human fleet. It was unstoppable, devastating, everything the Zorathians had hoped for. But it didn't account for one thing: the human will to survive. With a final, desperate maneuver, Holt and his crew used the chaos to their advantage. The Vigilance flew straight into the heart of the Zorathian fleet, slipping through the barrage and heading straight for the weapon. The Zorathians, blind with rage, couldn't react fast enough. Holt's voice rang out as they closed in on the weapon. "Now!" The Vigilance launched a full assault on the Zorathian cannon, disabling it with a series of pinpoint strikes. The weapon sputtered, then went dark. The Zorathian fleet, crippled and leaderless, was no longer a threat. Karaz watched as his forces disintegrated before his eyes. For the first time in his life, he felt the crushing weight of defeat. The humans had done the impossible. As the Zorathian warlord fell to his knees, humanity's greatest victory was sealed. The galaxy would never be the same, and the Zorathians, for all their might, would never again be the apex predators. Humanity had proven that no matter the odds, no matter the cost, they would fight to the very end. And in that fight, they had secured their place in the stars.